thinking is being understood as one of the key skills to have for a leader, and yet the most unpopular skill that people master consciously. Critical thinking is often misunderstood, because when I ask people about the what of critical thinking, what is critical thinking really, I often hear critical thinking as being synonymous to logical reasoning. Critical thinking is logical reasoning. So I want you to question that and see, is critical thinking really logical reasoning, or is it judicious reasoning? Are you judiciously looking at a particular situation to see what logic will play here, and then allowing emotions as well and creating a balance between logical reasoning and emotions? Or are you only getting carried away with the logic and the rationale, which in fact is incomplete and is not really the right way of looking at a particular problem or a situation, especially when you think that you are using a critical thinking process. Critical thinking ability is a summation of logical thinking and emotions. In fact, EQ sits right in the middle of critical thinking. If you are low on your emotional quotient, on your emotional intelligence, you cannot be a critical thinker. Critical thinking is not about thinking critically. It is not about being critical about things and being cynical about the situations, or not wanting to trust till you test the evidence and go with that thought process. Critical thinking is about using different sources, different ways of looking at a particular situation, using your logical ability and your emotional intelligence together. So how do you develop critical thinking? You develop critical thinking by allowing open discussions, feedback, and using information well. Now, what does open discussions mean? It is a great idea for you to slot certain time with your teams and announce it to be an open discussion time. In these open discussions, you need to spell out certain rules. And the rules are that no one holds any position for the next 1 hour in the room. Nobody is senior and nobody is junior. Nobody has more experience and no one has any less experience. No one is right and no one is wrong. And with these rules in place, you put a situation on the table and allow an open discussion to happen. Often we say that we are indulging in open discussions and we say that we lead open discussions in our organizations, but it doesn't happen the way it is supposed to happen. Open discussions happen when you spell out certain rules about how it is an open discussion, how no position matters, how no right or wrong matters, how no experience more or less matters. And that's when you're preparing people to truly open up for a valid, meaningful discussion. Critical thinking is about allowing more and more windows for such open discussions, because this is what brings in more logic. This is what makes people feel comfortable to say what they think, what is their perspective, instead of feeling challenged or feeling let down or snubbed by someone else. Right? So open discussion is a great way to sharpen your critical thinking process. The second way to do that is to use feedbacks. Now, feedbacks are often done in a very wrong manner. We as leaders feel very good about the fact that we encourage feedbacks. We allow people to share how they feel about us. In our organization, we have a 360-degree feedback process, but do we really know how to take feedback and how to even give feedback? Giving a feedback to people should be done when people ask for your feedback. You will realize that often when you are disappointed or frustrated about people not working on your piece of advice, it is done because you have given your advice without anyone seeking it. When I'm not asking you for a feedback and you just throwing one at me, I am not open to receiving that feedback, let alone working on it. So if you really want your feedback to be taken seriously, then it's a great practice to wait until someone really asks for your feedback, so that it's respected and it's valued, so that the effort that you're putting in giving that feedback is taken a lot more seriously than otherwise. Now, even if it is asked for, how you give feedback is an important thing to understand and develop. So I always remember this art of giving feedback with an acronym called SBI, where S stands for the situation, and B stands for the behavior, and I stands for impact. Which means I'm not talking about everything that you do and everything I don't like about you just because you've asked for a feedback. And now it's a great opportunity for me to say all that I've always wanted to say to you. If I'm doing that, I'm not giving you a feedback, I'm just venting out. And venting out is not the same as feedback. When somebody is asking for a feedback, then the way to give feedback is to talk about a particular situation, for which that person should be asking you a very specific question. So the S from your end when you're asking for that question is how specific you are, and S from my end when I'm giving that feedback is how much am I restricting myself to just that particular situation and not talking generic about everything that you are or I think you are. So if in this particular situation you are asking me a question, then here is what I feel my feedback is, right? So if you are worried about or disturbed about someone's punctuality, for example, then instead of using generic words like you're always late or you don't do this and that and this and that and then you are late as well, you can just restrict yourself to a particular situation and say that day before when you stepped in late into the meeting, we missed out on your valuable inputs that you could have shared with us in the first 15 minutes when we concluded an important part of the discussion. So it'll be great if you could make time, if you could plan your time in a way that you can join us from the time the meeting starts. Now, what you do when you give a feedback like this is you help the person to stay focused on a specific situation, and then you share the impact that it had on other people. So when I say that if you could have joined us on time, your inputs could have been included, I am sharing with you what is the impact of you walking in late. And the third part, the third part of it is the behavior. So when you are walking in late, it makes the other people around in the room also take time lightly. And then it creates a ripple effect and everyone seems to be walking in at their own time and we're never able to conclude things on time, right? So when you are sharing the SBI format, you talk about a specific situation, you talk about the behavior which is bothering you basis that situation and the impact that it is creating. And then follow it up with a suggestion or an action plan that they can do instead. So if instead you could walk in 5 minutes before we start, we can make sure that your inputs are included as well and everyone will follow suit once they see you in the room on time, since you're the senior one here, right? So this is how you can rephrase your feedback. Feedback is an extremely powerful tool to sharpen critical thinking. For as long as it is understood in the right manner, it is given in the right manner and received in the right manner. And the third thing is information web. Again, we've talked a great deal about information web in our course, Upskilling Leadership Blueprint. But very briefly, if I have to touch upon this, information web essentially is your conscious effort of reaching out to multiple sources before arriving at a decision. When we are trying to solve a problem, we often go to the lowest hanging sources. 3 people you know, 2 websites that you visited, 1 book that you've read, 5 such similar experiences that have happened in the past, and that's about it. And we don't really go beyond. We don't get into the space which is still unknown. And that is extremely important to create a balanced viewpoint for a better decision. So if you want to work on your decision-making ability, you need to work on creating an information web, answering the what, when, why, how of the sources that you have chosen as your source point for the content that is relevant for the decision. So we've talked about this in much length, but I want you to take this back with you and think, how consciously do you create your own information web? How consciously are you giving and receiving feedback? And how consciously are you spelling out the open discussions and creating real openness in those discussions within your teams?